For the first part of today's lecture, I'll continue with some thoughts regarding the impact of an invading culture on the culture of the invaded. As uncomfortable as it might make you for me to frame it in those terms, the fact is that it would be almost impossible for any Native American who has experienced the brunt of an influx of European settlers into their lands and the takeover of those lands to see the situation any other way. I already hinted that the music of Native Americans had been changing during the 4 centuries from the time of the first of those European settlers to the time that recording devices became available to record their songs. And in the last lecture, I provided a clear example of what I mean by that. The song was Shisanehe from the Navajo Inamiwe ceremony. You may recall that the features I focused on were the song's AABA form, its pentatonicism, and its lilting compound time meter. Those features, as I tried to explain, point clearly to a profound European influence, as there was simply nothing like it among Native Americans to be found until the native singers adopted the approach. It turns out that those 3 formal features are especially indebted to a great religious revival that swept this then new nation during the early 1800s, a time of religious ferment known as the Second Great Awakening. I won't bother with the obvious, that there had been a First Great Awakening during the previous century, because that isn't germane to what I'm setting out here. Also, I'm going to conflate the Second Great Awakening with the so-called Third Great Awakening, which began about mid-century, since the two together essentially had a single and sustained impact on the culture and lives of Native Americans. The Second Great Awakening began right about the time when the United States was gaining vast tracts of land, either by purchase or by forcible means, beginning with the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. With the blessing of the United States government, particularly during the Jackson administration, and often with the support of the U.S. cavalry, missionaries from evangelical Christian churches fanned out all across the continent with the aim of Christianizing the native tribes. This was seen as potentially advantageous to the still new nation, motivated by the fever dream of manifest destiny, because it was expected that conversion to Protestant Christianity would make the natives more tractable, more likely to tolerate the seizure of their lands. It's surprising what you can get people to do if you just convince them that it's the will of God. So those missionaries, mostly Baptists and Methodists, which accounts in large part for their majority status to this day in many states and cities in the heartland of the United States, set out to convert Native Americans to a new way of thinking. If you took to heart what I said earlier about the fundamental difference in worldview between forager populations and those who practice agriculture, you might be able to anticipate the problem that I'm going to outline. To recap, if you're a hunter-gatherer, you do not grow your food. The earth grows your food for you, and your role is to gather it responsibly. If you are an agriculturalist, you have taken that process into your own hands, and the earth thereby becomes, at best, a sometimes reluctant partner in the project, and often an impediment to your aims. This accounts in large part for the fact that the deities of hunter-gatherers are overwhelmingly female, with the earth herself regarded as a great and benevolent mother. The deities of agriculturalists, on the other hand, reflect the worldview of those agriculturalists and are often male, usually kings and warriors. So that unbridgeable difference in basic outlook accounted for the fact that the missionaries met with very little success when they tried to convert the adults of the tribes. Their weird new religion made absolutely no sense to those adults. And so, humans being the ingenious critters that they are, the missionaries adopted Plan B, get them while they're young. That essentially is the indoctrination model still in force today, perhaps has always been in force, although differently realized in different times and places. The native children were taken from their parents and placed in boarding schools, where they learned to speak, read, and write the white man's language, chant the white man's magical invocations and recitations, sing the white man's songs, and worship the white man's God. What did those songs sound like? They would probably sound quite familiar to those born into Protestant religious contexts in this country, often simple hymns in simple formal plans such as AABA, a single verse of Amazing Grace provides a well-known example. Said in the pentatonic mode, again, Amazing Grace is an example, so is Jesus Loves Me, and often sung to a lilting revivalist rhythm. Those are all characteristic of Shisenehe. It's impossible to imagine that there is no causal connection here. The first music I'll examine today is a hymn of the Native American Church, which also exhibits some of those qualities I just named. Listen to the song and then I'll talk about it. What you just heard was a peyote hymn of the Native American Church. That's going to require some explanation. First, the Native American Church. This church, founded by Quanah Parker in 1918, was born out of a late 19th century movement, both religious and political, in which a number of native tribes cooperated. The movement began in northern Mexico, but its center of gravity has shifted north, and I understand that the church's headquarters, to the extent that it has one, can now be found in Anadarko, Oklahoma. The aim of the Native American Church movement was to try to preserve some native autonomy and culture in the face of a great and sustained political and cultural onslaught. Because a number of tribes were involved and all brought their distinctive practices to the table, the liturgy of the Native American Church is what might be regarded as synthetic. That is to say, on a typical Sunday morning, a worshiper is likely to encounter songs and lore from several different native groups, as well as references to the Christian gospel. And one of the features of that liturgy is the use of peyote as the Eucharistic sacrament instead of bread and wine. Peyote, which had been introduced to the southern plains from northern Mexico in the late 1800s, is a small ground-hugging cactus named for its hairy spines and known to have mild psychoactive properties, and many native groups have found it useful when entertaining such existential questions as, what is the purpose of my life? The Native American Church had to fight for the use of that worship aid in the appellate court system of the United States, and a series of decisions from the mid-20th century secured that right. The music you heard is essentially a communion hymn, sung during the distribution of the sacrament. I'm sure you noticed how repetitious it is. That means that it can be extended or shortened depending on the number of worshipers present and the amount of time it takes to serve them all. Let's note its particulars. For starters, there's a percussive backdrop, the fast beating of a water drum and the shaking of the Peyote Rattle. Listen. are various types of water drums, usually associated with a sacred rite, as in this case. The drum you heard is a small iron pot about half filled with water, over whose mouth is stretched a buckskin head. The drum head is beaten as fast as possible with a stick. Those drum strokes cannot be considered beats. They're far too fast for that. They're more like a timpani roll that underscores music without biasing its rhythmic profile in any way. Occasionally, the player will give the drum a little tossing motion to slosh water up on the buckskin head, keeping it moist and resulting in the distinctive sound that you hear. The Peyote Rattle is not made from a cactus, it's made from a gourd like most other Native American rattles. It's called the Peyote Rattle only because it is only used during the peyote ceremony of the Native American Church. It is, in other words, another sacred instrument. Now let's examine the music that the singer is singing. This hymn is sung entirely in vocables, and its structure resembles nothing quite so much as that of a simple children's hymn, like those taught to Native children in those boarding schools I mentioned earlier. The overall shape is basically identical to that of many simple strophic hymns in the English language. In this recording, you hear 4 of those strophes, although I put that word in quotation marks because since there are no actual words in the hymn, the resemblance to strophic hymns is superficial. In strophic hymns, a number of different verses are sung to the same music. The pattern, nevertheless, is unmistakable. I'll show you what I mean. Also, the pitch content of this hymn is pentatonic, like many of those simple children's hymns. Moreover, the shape of individual verses, if that's what they can be called, is a European one. If I were to notate this music in 4/4 time, a single verse would be 8 measures long. Let me show you. Now think about the structure of those 8 measures. The first 2 measures are immediately repeated. And the follow-up phrase is 4 measures long. In other words, the phrase structure of a single verse of this peyote hymn, in terms of measures, is 2 + 2 + 4. That is not a Native American pattern at all. It is very much a European pattern. It is so ubiquitous in the classical music of Europe that it might almost be considered the default position regarding phrasing. What I've tried to make clear is that, as in the case of Shisenahe, this music is only superficially Native American. It's sung in vocables with rattle and drum accompaniment. That's Native American. But if you look just beneath the surface, it's pretty obvious that this is European music in native costume. I'd like to offer the hymn one more time and invite you this time to notice its quiet, meditative, almost hypnotic quality. Just the right kind of music to foster the receptive state of mind that one presumably needs as one ingests the sacred cactus. I'm going to finish this lecture, and with it my 3-unit series on Native American music, with a lovely little lullaby from Zuni culture. The Zuni, like the Navajo, are a Pueblo culture who live along the Zuni River in western New Mexico. Before I offer any further comment, listen to the lullaby.
Poketana, akteki, oksiktana, kochitana, aktiktana, akteki, poketana, oksiktana, akteki, poketana, oksiktana, kochitana, akteki, poketana, oksiktana, kochitana, akteki, poketana, oksiktana, kochitana.
Let's start with the observation that the lullaby tradition can be found worldwide. Everywhere, mothers sing to their infants to lull them to sleep, which is what lullaby means, lull the baby. Lullabies are always simple songs. Can you imagine a polyphonic lullaby? Wouldn't that be a perversion? Wouldn't it violate the spirit of the tradition? This lullaby is a simple strophic song built on just 2 notes in a tonic-dominant relationship. The upper note is the tonic, as witness the fact that every verse, and ultimately the entire song, ends on it. The phrasing proportions are very much like those of the Peyote hymn that I took you through earlier. This song has a translatable text, which I'll now take you through.
Oksiktana, poketana, akteki, oksiktana, kochitana, aktiktana, akteki, poketana, oksiktana, akteki, poketana, oksiktana, kochitana, akteki, poketana, oksiktana, kochitana, akteki, poketana, oksiktana, kochitana.
So here's this Zuni mother who knows a sweet little song comparing her little boy to all these furry forest creatures. And she's singing that sweet song not to a little boy, but into a recording device at the behest of a musicologist. That must have seemed strange to her. How else would you account for that nervous little giggle at the end? Okay, it's quiz time.